Hello everyone, I'm Naila speaking for the Girl with the Curly Hair project, and today I want to take you through some pros and contras on mentioning you have autism on your work environment or job interviews. Mentioning you have autism in any kind of situation is tricky because we often don't feel safe enough to do it, and a lot of people still have a lot of prejudice when it comes to autism, especially in your work environment in which you spend a lot of the time. This can be very tricky indeed. I'm just going to list up some of the pros and the cons of this, and hopefully you'll find them helpful. The pros of mentioning that you have autism can lead to a better understanding of you. If you have a willing work environment and a willing team who's willing to research autism or listen to you, they may provide you with an understanding and a safety that you cannot find someplace else. It might also lead to an adaptive work environment, which can be a dimming of the lights, putting you in a separate room where you won't hear other people talking amongst themselves or phones ringing, an adapted workload or a specialized work schedule for you that makes things less overwhelming, etc., and so forth. Another thing that can lead to telling people you have autism during a job interview or in your workplace is that it will lead to a safer workplace. When people know you have autism, you might feel safer in your own self, to being your own self. You don't have to be afraid to come across as weird or awkward or quirky, and people will know you have autism. You don't have to make effort into being super social after work hours, but you can tell people like, I've had enough, I'm too tired, and they will understand. So you will feel safer, but you will also feel safer in expressing your own self and your ideas and your thought patterns, which in the end may contribute to creating a better workplace or more production or a better work relationship with your colleagues and so forth and so on. The negative side on mentioning that you have autism on the work floor or during a job interview may be that your employers or colleagues might feel that they have to babysit you. There is still a lot of prejudice around autism, and people will often think that your special needs means that you have to be watched 24/7, matter of speech, and that you're allowed special treatment, whereas they are not. They often do not understand what sensory processing is and how it affects us really badly, and they might turn to treating you in a negative manner or bullying you even. So that's a very negative side of mentioning that you have autism. When it comes to mentioning it in job interviews, this may actually lead to employers not hiring you because they do not understand autism and may perceive it as a very negative thing and do not wish to hire you based on merely that. Not mentioning you have autism, there are some pretty bad contrasts on this one, because not mentioning and you get hired, people will perceive you as different anyway. You cannot hide something like that. Especially when you work in a team, people will notice you're not the team player like they are and will use that against you. They might perceive you as unwilling to cooperate. Well, in fact, you do not understand the rules of the team or the group you are in. You're not being understood. Not being understood means you don't feel safe in your workplace, meaning you will not really reflect to other people what you're thinking, the ideas you're having, and you're holding back your talents from them. The positive side of not mentioning that you have autism is that there will be no prejudice against you. No one will be able to use it against you, and especially in job interviews, this means that an employer will not decide whether to hire you or not based solely on the autism. I have had job interviews where I mentioned I had autism, And this was specialized for people with autism, working with people with autism as therapists, where I was seriously questioned in my capabilities merely because I had autism. Whether or not you mention you have autism is, of course, completely and entirely your own decision, and can be dependent on many factors. If you know you'll be working in a team, it might be good that when you do get hired, to mention that you are sensory sensitive or an introvert, or maybe even have issues with communication. You don't have to use the word autism by itself. You might want to do that after a longer period of time when you've built up enough trust. But people do understand what it is to be hypersensitive, because it's a word known to society, what it's like to be an introvert, because it's known to society, or what it's like to lack social skills, to be awkward, because it's known to society. Combined as autism, it will lead to prejudice, and you might want to wait with mentioning that until there's enough trust built up, or people make the connection themselves by putting all of those things together. Mentioning it in a job interview might lead to prejudice beforehand, and they will look at autism as a negative quality and will forget to look at your positive quality. So I might want to wait with that. If you work or having a job interview in a work environment that is more individual, you might not want to mention it at all, because it will not affect anyone particularly. So there are many pros and contras to keep in mind when you have job interviews or work already in your workplace, and it's not very easy. The most important thing to understand is when you mention you have autism, don't come forward with a list of demands, because it will make you seem like very threatening and overwhelming. And even though, yes, we are sensory very sensitive and we're introverts, if you do have a work environment that has bright lights and everything like that, just go by it one thing at a time, very gently. Understand that people too have to understand, and do not understand where you're coming from, because they don't have your eyes, your ears, your sense of touch. Explain it to them very gently why a certain buzzing sound is driving you crazy or exhausting you, and take things one step at a time. Hope this was helpful, and speak to you soon. Bye.